Hi. As part of an upcoming report I am building for the Robert Parker Wine Advocate on Margaret River Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon, I have asked producers that I wasn't able to go and visit personally if they were able to send me, or if they were interested in sending me, verticals of their wines, their premium wines, in order for me to get a good gauge on the region. What I'm most interested in is clones, vintages, vineyard sites, and producer expression. I know that sounds like a lot, but when you condense it into each of these wines, I'll break it down and explain it to you. And so it's been very valuable for me to have a look at things like this. If you're new here, my name is Erin Larkin. I'm an Australian wine critic. I review the wines from Australia and New Zealand for Robert Parker Wine Advocate. And this is my wine YouTube channel where I have the opportunity to talk about all of the things that I love and that excite me, discussion points, nerdy stuff, geek stuff, the stuff we love. So, the Fraser Gallop Palladian Chardonnay is their premium expression of Chardonnay from Margaret River. The estate is in Wilyabrup, which is sort of in the central heart of the Margaret River region. As you know, I'm sure you've been there. If you haven't been there, you'll be familiar with the cape. It's an interesting shape. It juts out in this three-sided thing, right? So it's surrounded on three sides by ocean. And it's this beautiful spectrum of growing areas from Yallingup in the north to Carradale in the south. And Margaret River Township is sort of bang in the middle, to be honest. Wilyabrup's a little bit further north than that. And the region is really known when it comes to Chardonnay for the Gingin clone. It's an adaptation, evolution of the Mendoza clone, the Wente clone from California. And it displays really, really specifically in Margaret River, more so than anywhere else that this clone is grown. So really poor fruit set, very low yielding. The bunches are tiny. Some of them can be, 70, 80 grams a bunch, this kind of size. Really, really tightly packed berries. Hen and chicken, so big berry, little berry, which is really good for power and acid. Obviously, the little berries are quite phenolic. Big berries have got kind of more juice in them. So the wines are really powerful. Gingin clone is really, really powerful. And the spectrum with which to pick it is really narrow, because what you have leading up to ripe on the nose is this really kind of grapefruit, citrus, tangy sort of spectrum. And right beyond it, right after that day of ripeness, afternoon of ripeness, you start moving into like yellow peach, guava, mango, really kind of tropical characters. So at finished wine, usually in Margaret River is around 13.5. You get them down to sort of 12% up to about 14% in warmer vintages, or actually not just in warmer vintages, but up to 14%. But usually they sit around the 13.5 mark. Now these wines are 13, 12.5, 12.5, 12, 13.5, 13, which really confirms the thing that I'm trying to tell you. And what we can see via this wine, which is 100% Gingin clone, 100% new oak, same place, same vineyard, is the vintages. So let's talk about it. The 2022 vintage was really hot up in Perth, and down in Margaret River, it was a really warm year. The interesting thing about what we experienced here in Perth, which is 3 hours north of Margaret River, is extended heat events. We had one for 13 days over 40 degrees centigrade, followed by, 5 days over 40 a couple of days later. It was a very, very hot summer and it felt unrelenting. In Margaret River, it was very, very warm. Temperatures were lower than that. They don't hit 40 degrees usually, but what they do get is, mid-30s. The thing about Margaret River that makes it so great for temperature is the cold nights. The wines, reds, whites, have beautiful acid retention, and that's due to the cool nights. And that's because of the moderating influence of these three sides of ocean. In 2022, the nights in Margaret River were really balmy and beautiful and warm, but that's not great for wine. So it was a warm year, and the wines produced have been very, very good. Very, very good indeed. I've looked at about 80 barrel samples of 2022 Chardonnay, including a host of wines for this report that fall under that vintage. And on the whole, they remind me of the 2014 vintage in that there's lots of ripe fruit. They're kind of abundantly fruit forward, and the acid's really soft and juicy. It doesn't have this tight, tense, kind of tangy character that the 21 had. They're really kind of powerful and abundant sort of wines. And that's what this is. It's a really wonderful expression of the 22 vintage. It shows the heat, but it does it in a really restrained way. And at 13% alcohol, that says to me that the viticulturist here was picking, and the winemaker was guiding the picking at a time that really suits the quality of this wine. And by quality, I mean character. at the moment it's got real kind of banana esters and white peach and apples and hint of custard powder. Like it's really kind of abundant but tight and good. The thing I find most attractive about this wine that was very evident when I looked at it in a vertical is it's got this really kind of sleek phenolic casing. This is a really crystalline, pure wine. It's not austere, but it is like glassy. And that was really evident in this. Now, my favourite wine, the highest pointed wine for me in this lineup was the 2021. Cooler year, not a cool year, not cold. I think that it's cold because there was a lot of rain. We had these 2 cyclones that came down the coast, one in February, one in March. The one in March basically took out 80% of Kalbarri, which is this beautiful coastal town north of Perth, sort of 10 hours north. It was quite catastrophic. But the weather that it dumped on Margs was kind of intense rain in pockets. So the season, whilst being sort of moderate, was wet. So producers really had to viticulturally manage what happened that year. And the wines that I have seen, on the whole, I far prefer the Chardonnays to the Cabernets. The Cabernets are just really quite light through the finish. They don't seem to have, obviously this is open to exception, they don't seem to have persistence of fruit. But the Chardonnays, because they were picking a little earlier, those guys that picked before that 10th, 11th of February deluge, or quite afterwards, after the water had drained, were able to make exceptional Chardonnays. And it's been a really beautiful year. So it's just pristine, tight, focused. It's got really exciting kind of precision. It's a beautiful wine. And for me, the vintage and the style of this house slotted together beautifully in 2021. Moving into 20, we've got another really warm year, earliest start date on record for many producers, and an early finish. Most importantly, lots of producers were home for Easter, which almost never happens. This is rich and full. So here we've got like saffron and turmeric and kind of yellow peach, and this is 12.5%. So it's the lowest on the table to me, and this is not what I know, this is what I'm assuming when I see this, knowing what the vintage was like. To me, that means that the fruit was picked a little bit earlier in order to mitigate kind of oncoming warmth. Maybe the fruit came to ripeness a little bit earlier. But the wine itself has got beautiful focus, again, a house style characteristic, but a really nice thing to see in 2020, which was a warm, plush, abundant year. Moving again into another odd vintage, more rain, 2019. This was cooler than 21 and not as cool as 17, but again, quite a bit of rain in 2019. I love the wines from 2019. They have this beautiful kind of aromatic detail and precision about them. It was a really cool year, 12% alcohol, but just a beautiful year both for Cabernet and Chardonnay. Cabernets are really graphitey and black and sort of detailed, lacy. The whites are kind of richer and more savoury and quite exciting. So that was evident in this wine. I'm just laughing, I loved that wine. Beautiful expression of 2019. 2018 was one of the perfect years, really warm through the growing season. There were no major heat spikes. There was no major weather events like rain or hail or frost or anything like that. Yields were good. The Marri blossoms, which are these beautiful trees that are endemic to Margaret River, are an abundant food source for these birds called silver eyes, which are viticultural pests. They peck at the bunches and destroy the fruit. But in 2018, they had so much blossoms in the trees that they didn't get into the vineyards, which was a really good thing. So we had abundant yields, good quality, beautiful growing season, no birds or very few birds. So it was a really good year, and the wines are really powerful and graceful and balanced and full, and that's what this is. It's a perfect expression, a mirror of that season. A big wine, 13.5, so not a big wine, but a big wine in terms of like structure and kind of countenance, but a gorgeous mirror of the year that occurred across the spring of 17 and the summer of 2018. And then we move into 2017. So 2017 was cold and wet. And it was a really challenging year for producers. I think it was the first true cold, wet year that they'd had since 2006. And certainly from my observational perspective, looking at the wines that came out of that year, I think that your ability to manage the viticulture in that season was more important than ever. And the producers that did it successfully and courageously, fruit dropping, canopy management, etc., really, really succeeded in that season. As a whole, and again, open to exceptions, I really far prefer the 2017 Chardonnays to the Cabernets. The Cabernets to me feel a little more dried herbs and kind of fresh leather and that kind of thing. But the Chardonnays have got plentitude and they've got depth and they've got grace, and I think producers worked really hard to make wine that year. And the successful ones, like this Fraser Gallop Palladian, really nailed it. And I've looked at a lot of these wines blind in international lineups, not just Fraser Gallop, but I mean 2017 Chardonnays from the region, and they perform exceptionally well. So I think that through adversity, we find success. And so what I found out when I tasted these wines like this from this producer is that actually, even though the growing seasons of 22, 20 and 18 were exceptional with regard to their lack of pesky rain and viticultural challenges, for this producer, I actually prefer the cooler seasons of 21, 19 and 17 in the glass. That's totally open to your interpretation, but it was an exciting kind of thing for me to work out, and it leans largely on the fact that these wines are really spicy. You get kind of exotic Indian, saffron, turmeric, etc. through these wines. These wines are more fruit pure. So go your own way, in the great words of Stevie Nicks, and I'd like to hear what you think about them. If you've got any of these wines in your home, in your cellar, if you know this producer, if you love this producer, if you've never heard of them, I'd like to know about it. Let me know.